You live surrounded by people, on the train, in the office, in your apartment building where you've never once spoken to the neighbor 3 feet away on the other side of the wall. You call it city life. You call it normal. But somewhere deep inside your nervous system, something keeps sending a signal you can't quite name. A low hum, a friction, a restlessness with no obvious source. What if that signal isn't noise? What if it's a warning? In 1947, a behavioral researcher named John B. Calhoun began watching mice. Not ordinary lab mice running mazes. He gave them everything. Unlimited food, unlimited water, perfect temperature, no predators, no disease, no reason to struggle. He built them a paradise, and then he watched what happened when they ran out of space. What he discovered changed how scientists think about civilizations, cities, and the future of the human species. This is the Calhoun effect. Calhoun's most famous experiment ran from 1968 to 1973. He called it Universe 25. The enclosure was a 9-foot square pen, climate-controlled, stocked with nesting boxes, food hoppers, and water dispensers. He introduced 4 pairs of mice, 8 animals in a space theoretically capable of supporting several thousand. For the first 100 days, they bred without stopping. Population doubled, then doubled again, then again. Everything looked like paradise. Everything looked exactly as designed. Then the crowding started. At peak population, Universe 25 held over 2,000 mice, and that is when the experiment stopped being about mice. Calhoun noticed something he hadn't predicted. The physical space could hold the numbers, but the social space couldn't. Every mouse needed to perform certain behaviors to function as a mouse. Territory, courtship, conflict, resolution, hierarchy, parenthood. These weren't optional. They were biological requirements. But when 2,000 animals packed into a 9-foot pen, there was no room left to be a mouse. The social roles ran out before the food did. A group of males near the center of the pen stopped competing entirely. Calhoun called them the beautiful ones. They groomed themselves obsessively. Their fur was immaculate. They never fought. They never mated. They ate. They slept. They existed. They performed none of the behaviors that defined a functioning member of the colony. They were, by every physical measure, perfectly healthy. And by every behavioral measure, completely hollow. Females began abandoning their nests. Mothers forgot how to mother. Young mice were left to fend for themselves days too early and died at rates that shocked even Calhoun, who had spent years preparing for something to go wrong. Aggression, when it appeared, was random and misaimed. Males attacked other males for no social reason. Females attacked their own offspring. The social grammar of the species simply disintegrated. Then the population collapsed. Not because of disease, not because food ran out. It collapsed because the mice stopped reproducing. The beautiful ones never tried. The mothers who remained couldn't complete the cycle. Births slowed. Deaths continued. The colony declined toward zero, with no physical cause anyone could point to. By the final count, Universe 25 ended with a few dozen surviving animals who had completely lost the ability to perform the behaviors required for survival. Calhoun introduced new, healthy mice. The surviving colony did not recover. The behaviors were gone. The knowledge of how to be a mouse had vanished from the population entirely. Calhoun published his findings. He did not frame them as a mouse study. He framed them as a warning. He coined a phrase, behavioral sink. It described the point at which crowding becomes so severe that normal social behavior stops functioning. Not because the animals want it to stop, but because the architecture of the environment makes it impossible to complete. Every interaction becomes abbreviated. Every social role becomes contested. Every relationship becomes friction. And the organism, unable to resolve what it was built to resolve, begins to shut down from the inside. Sociologist Jonathan Turner later built on Calhoun's work, arguing that human beings carry the same core need for social role completion. You are not designed to be a node. You are not designed to be a user, a subscriber, a daily active user, an account. You are designed to be someone's son or daughter, someone's rival, someone's protector, someone's neighbor in the deep and transactional sense of that word. When those roles can't be filled, something in the architecture of your psychology begins to misfire. Now look at the city you live in. Look at the apartment block. Look at the open plan office where you sit 3 feet from someone and message them instead of speaking. Look at the dinner table where everyone is present and no one is there. Look at the feed that delivers the simulation of connection at a volume that makes actual connection feel unnecessary and also somehow insufficient. Researcher Robert Putnam spent 2 decades studying what he called social capital in American communities. He published his conclusions in 2000 in a book called Bowling Alone. The data showed something that should have been alarming. As population density in cities increased and as digital connectivity expanded, membership in civic groups, local associations, and informal community gatherings declined sharply. Americans were, by every objective measure, more surrounded by people than at any point in history. They were also, by every self-reported measure, more lonely. Putnam called it the collapse of civic infrastructure. Calhoun might have called it behavioral sink. The beautiful ones are worth sitting with a moment longer, because Calhoun was very precise about what made them beautiful, and his precision is uncomfortable. They were not broken in any visible way. Their bodies were perfect. Their coats were perfect. Their health panels would have passed every test. What was absent was invisible. The willingness to perform. The drive to complete the social cycle. The readiness to enter the friction of real relationship, which always involves conflict, loss, compromise, risk, failure, repair. They had opted out of all of it, and they had done so not out of laziness, but because the environment had become so saturated that entering the social fray had stopped producing any legible outcome. So they withdrew. They groomed. They waited. They did not know they were waiting for the end. You have almost certainly felt a version of this, the sense that the world is very full and also somehow not quite real. The awareness that you are connected to hundreds or thousands of people at a low resolution level and to almost no one at the high resolution level that actually satisfies. The exhaustion that comes not from doing too much, but from too much stimulation with not enough meaning. The creeping suspicion that you're very busy and also not really doing anything. Calhoun was not a pessimist. He believed the data pointed toward a design problem, not a fate. He spent the later part of his career studying what he called the most favorable environment, configurations of space and social architecture that allowed animals, and by extension people, to complete their behavioral repertoire without being crushed by density. He believed cities could be designed to solve this. He believed the collapse was not inevitable. He called the window before behavioral sink was reached the second space, and he believed it was a choice, not a given. Developmental psychologist Urie Bronfenbrenner, writing independently in the 1970s, reached a similar conclusion through the study of children. What children require to develop fully, he argued, is not resources. It is not stimulation. It is not technology or programming or enrichment. What they require is at least one person who is irrationally crazy about them, one relationship that holds, one social role that is theirs and is completed again and again, with continuity and presence. Without that, development does not fail dramatically. It just quietly, incrementally, stops going as deep as it was supposed to. Universe 25 ended because a population reached peak density and lost access to the behaviors that made it a population rather than a collection of individuals. The mice never knew that was happening. They simply found themselves in a world where the things they were built to do could not be done, and over time, they forgot how to do them. You live surrounded by people. You are more connected than any human being in history. Your ancestors would be stunned by the number of faces you see in a week, and yet the signal keeps coming. The low hum, the friction, the restlessness with no obvious source. Now you have a name for it. The question is what you intend to do about it. Because unlike the mice, you know the experiment is running. And unlike the mice, you can choose to walk out of Universe 25 before the population peaks.